Hey, what's up, family? Welcome back to the Bridge City Community Church podcast. We still don't fully have a name for this, but welcome back to episode, I believe, 4. We're really glad that you tuned in today. And today is a special episode because we're looking about some things moving forward. We've got some exciting news about maybe an in-person gathering that's coming up soon. But if I could title this episode anything that I wanted, I've got to get approval, I'm sure. If I could title this anything I wanted because of the relevancy to May the 4th that we just experienced, I would call this Return of the Jedi, because we have a very special guest returning today for the first time. Can y'all welcome Pastor Sean Bishop?
What's up, everyone?
To the episode. Yeah.
Hey.
Pastor Sean is back. He's returned from a sabbatical, and so what we thought would be cool is just to be able to let him share a little bit about where his heart's been at, what God's been doing in his life, maybe what rest looked like during this time period, and then we want to share some exciting news that's coming about, like we mentioned, an in-person gathering that's happening here soon. And so I'm going to hit you with the response questions, the reflection questions about sabbatical. You're obviously back, but how was it? How was sabbatical, and was it difficult?
Yes and no. It's I've shared with you already, but the whole aspect of that very first week, that was tougher than I had anticipated.
Why?
Well, we had kind of our last service right on the 23rd, and then after that, I'm just gone at a very pivotal moment, a very pivotal time, and so you deal with all these feelings of guilt, as you're going through it.
I'm the easiest person to guilt in the world. Like, if you want to guilt, trip me, dude, look at me with some sad eyes or something. So
yeah, not so much.
I would be in trouble. Be in trouble. But then remembering that, number one, we did this because we felt it was important, and that because also I'm a man who lives under authority and under accountability, and that's what those who are holding my life accountable said this needs to happen. I was going to say it was mandated, right? I mean,
this
by
needs to happen.
your overseers.
Yeah.
That I think ultimately that's in place because one, we all fall under authority, ultimately under, I know this is your heartbeat, but the kingship of Jesus. But also even in our everyday life, that you even have spiritual overseers and oversight that care deeply about you and your health. So what is it? You're in a couple days in to being back in the office, new location. So what does it feel like being back so far? Is it like coming back from vacation?
No.
Okay.
No. A lot of times with a vacation, you kind of come back and feel like you need a vacation from your vacation.
Facts.
But no, this was very different. I mean, obviously, I was ready to come back really around week 3.
Okay, so half the length of time you had to be gone.
Yeah, right. And just because normally my whole deal is I'm usually after 3 or 4 days, I'm itching to do something, get back, and so it was really forcing me to stop. I talked about the guilt that I experienced, but around about day 4 or day 5, and the Holy Spirit's you're not Jesus, right? You're this whole Messiah complex, the world's gonna fall apart if you're not
True.
in it. And you realize very quickly that no, the world goes on and actually functions quite well without you in it. And,
it's I've heard that kind of thought process before of where we feel let's just use this as a perfect example, right? You're the lead pastor of a church, going through a big shift, big change. There's a lot of things on your plate, a lot of responsibility, and there's this feeling sometimes of oh man, maybe if you've ever related to this before in your life, even watching this, that oh man, I'm gonna let God down, or man, I'm gonna if I'm the leader of a student ministry or a young adult ministry, and it's oh I'm gonna let it down. It's you were never upholding it. Did we ever consider that we were never the ones holding it together anyways? And it's it didn't go up in flames.
It really is his church.
Yeah, right. So when you did get past the guilt, though, what helped you settle into rest? And I think we've talked about this too, that there's a difference. We talked about this in staff prayer.
Yeah.
There's a difference between rest and relaxation.
Yeah.
We can relax. We do really good at relaxing. Binging and/or season 2 on Netflix or on Disney Plus, whatever, is relaxing. But there's a difference between relaxing and resting. What helped you settle into rest?
I think what really helped me probably the most was reconnecting with some really good friends who I've just been, we've been walking together for 20 plus years or so, and just being able to sit and hear the stories of what God is doing in their life. In so many ways, things were paralleling.
Yeah.
That was just really cool because it takes you out of, when you're in ministry, there's almost sometimes this sense of isolation.
Oh, that's real.
Yeah, and you're just, you feel singled out and, all these different things, but to be able to be around other like-minded people who are just, he didn't, because of the work-life realities, right? So he wasn't aware of so many of the different things that we were going through. And so as we're walking through and talking through just some of the things, and then him sharing what God was doing, it's like, sometimes I almost felt like we were the same person.
Yeah.
But it was good. And then you realize as all of the trappings of the things that you feel like you have to do begin to strip away, there's a clarity that just begins to settle in. And you begin to be able to see things maybe from a little different perspective. That's very healthy, very good.
That makes me think of, with our young adult ministry, we actually just walked through a study that was based off of the really popular book, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Pastor John Mark Comer out in Oregon wrote that, but we did a kind of a more condensed version where there were kind of 5 key topics, and he talked about some of the ways that we, silence and solitude, something like that. And he talked about a park out in Oregon that it's like, he'll go to regularly, and it's like the quietest place he can find in this bustling city. And but he'll intentionally find time to go there because there's like these moments where work-life balance. I read something the other day that was like work-life balance doesn't even exist. It's like we have to learn to say no and set parameters, and we over-prioritize things, and then it's like the things of God get squeezed out, and because of that, then we're like, oh my gosh, why do I feel like I'm running on fumes, and why do I feel like nothing is working together, and why do I feel this way and that way, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And it's like, well, there's no rest. Yeah, we think relaxation is it, and rest is really the answer for our souls, I think. Absolutely. Yeah. What's it like re-entering the rhythms of church life so far? A couple days in, meetings.
A lot of it is playing... a little bit of catch up.
Yeah.
It was
lots of emails.
Well, it was tough because my notifications weren't off. And so they would chime in every now and then, and I had to really resist the urge to not look and to not read, but really stepping into the rhythms. What was really cool was the level of peace and joy that was already here and happening all around, and in that, and it was good. It was really good.
Yeah. What's something that like during that time that like really refreshed your soul, and then maybe something that like God spoke to you or that was your experience during that time?
Well, so for my wife and I we both love water, but she loves the ocean.
Yeah. That's my wife too.
I love rivers and streams and fountains, right? It's kind of like power, but a little under control. The ocean is just this raw strength, and it's loud, and it's boisterous, and it's all these different things, and being able to find those places. If I can kind of wax a little deeper here, one of the questions that I'd asked the Lord some time back is like, God, where are you? Like really, how does a person find you? And he spoke really clearly in my spirit. He said, I am where I've always been. Go back to the beginning. And so I went back to the beginning, which for me was Genesis, right? Genesis chapter 1.
Yeah.
And it says right there, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, or empty. And And it was like he was saying to me, if you really want to find me, go back to where I was at the beginning, in the empty spaces. And immediately Psalm 46:10 comes to mind, right? Be still,
Yeah.
and know. And you know, I'm like this deep thinker. Like, what do you mean know? Like know, like how do you know?
Sure. And even the be still part.
Yeah.
That's like going back to the hurry thing a little bit. Is like we're not very good at being still.
Mm-mm.
We think that like the couch is being still, or you know, sitting in a hammock, and maybe that is, you know, at a point.
Or even, you know, in my quiet time, have my favorite worship song on. Have my very...
Listen, those that walk by my office, and you've encountered this numerous times, I will listen to instrumental albums that are background noise, because when I listen to worship songs, I have to sing it, and I get distracted by the lyrics. And if I'm preparing a lesson or a message or something that's like spiritual development piece of content, it's easy to like hear these worship lyrics, and then I'm like, oh, I'm completely distracted from this topic I'm reading in Scripture.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe the worship music in the background.
Well, yeah, and so a couple of days, which were really just so awesome, to be able to just sit with nothing.
That's hard.
It is.
It's hard.
It is. And so what really helped me, though, is I would have a notepad
Yep.
that just sat here. And number one, I didn't feel guilty that the thoughts were there.
Yeah.
Right? So, because these thoughts just start flooding in. And so we just to be able to write them down and go, okay, well, that's for later.
Sure.
And just to sit there in silence. And my only.
How long does it take you? Because I've wrestled with this, where true silence and solitude, no music, no conversations, trying to get in a place, maybe that means putting on headphones that are noise canceling, but no music playing through them, just so you can try to hear quietly, to be present with God.
Yeah.
How long does it take you, though, to empty the thoughts of like laundry and the yard being mowed and this thought? And
Well, when you're on sabbatical and you're kind of in it, it
Yeah.
gets easier.
yeah.
But a lot of times, full disclosure, so like, I've been practicing this for a few years.
Yeah.
But like early on, I would try to get quiet and then just wake up like 2 hours later because I just fell asleep.
It's
It's
gone.
like, I'm gonna spend some time in quiet time with
Yeah.
Jesus, and then usually my posture begins like this and ends up like this.
That's the joke that Tiffany and I have in our house, is that I'm verbally like, I don't take naps. Like I don't take naps. You'll never find me at home in the afternoon, even on a Sunday. I know Sunday afternoon naps are holy for the saints of the Lord. You'll never find me like going and getting in my bed under the blankets in the middle of the day. If it's not after 9 p.m., I'm probably not there. And but the joke is that if I'm still on the couch long enough, all the dads get this.
Oh yeah.
I start to get a little low, and then I'm gone. I just drift. And that's where like my dad growing up was like, oh, I dozed off.
Yeah, it's not a nap.
It's not a nap. I'm dozing off.
Yeah, but over time, it really becomes a sweet place. And the crazy thing about learning to be still for me was not trying to hear a voice, right? Because I'm a creative, right? I'm a musician. I do music. I do the whole thing, and my mind can come up with some really crazy stuff.
Yeah. You got Morgan Freeman in your head right now,
right? But
narrating.
The goal was just to be still, and what I found that in doing that, it was not in those seasons, but it was after those seasons that his voice became clearer. You know, so it's like people would say like, well, what did you hear in your quiet time? And I go, nothing. You know, nothing. But later in the day,
you start to piece it together.
Yeah, later in the day, you know, Jesus said that out of our belly would flow rivers of living water, and I would these thoughts and these images would begin to come not from my mind, but someplace deeper, just almost like bubbling up.
Yeah.
You know, and you go, wow. And you just begin to write those things down. You begin to jot those things down. And then over the course of this time, these couple of weeks, it begins to form a picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I get a lot of the more clarity sometimes, maybe even things I was praying about, maybe something I was reading in Scripture. I feel like so often, and maybe it's because I have no choice, I can't do anything else when I'm driving or in the shower. And it's like, when I'm in the shower, I can't access my laptop. I use a software called Evernote. It's a cloud-based synchronized deal. So I'll add notes and I'll put tags to it, and it'll be like a sermon for later or something I read or listen to on a podcast. Yeah. I can't do any of that when I'm driving. And so I'll get these thoughts and I'm like wrestling with them, and I'm having this, if you could see me in my truck, I'm like having this conversation between me and God. I'm trying to
drive by going, that guy's crazy.
I know, he's like at the light, this dude's just like going at it. You know, I'm in deep prayer, like whatever. But and maybe there's part of that where it's like when we really do get still and we have no other distractions, and it's you, and it's the Holy Spirit, and it begins revealing. Yeah. What I think a lot of that looks like is like, I think it's part of that spiritual maturity. It's kind of that process of learning more of this, the relationship with God, and learning how to be still and hear from Him, I feel like. You know, I think people want to know, obviously looking forward, for us as a church, you're back, we're moving forward, we got some exciting things coming, we had an Easter cookout, which was cool, but for you, how has the time away shaped maybe your vision and hopes for the church? What are some things that you feel like maybe you got more clarity on for us going forward?
I'll tell you, simplicity. Simplicity. I've often asked myself this question.
You mean we overcomplicate things?
Check this out. Listen. So the whole church was birthed by a group of uneducated, non-professional, they knew how to fish, collect taxes, and do stuff, but about like the things of God, you know, it's like knew nothing, and in a relatively short period of time, they turned the world.
I think it's Acts 11. One of my favorite. I can check that for you, but it's talking about in Antioch when they were first called Christians. One of my favorite pieces of the entire early church model, because there's this moment where they've got to go and get the apostles and Paul and bring them to Antioch. Because of what's happening. But it started, if you read that portion, I think it's Acts chapter 11, it says that some men from Cyprus and Cyrene, I believe, were there preaching the gospel to non-Jews, which was huge during the early church model, because it was just a Jewish proclamation to that point. Now they're going to the ends of the earth type people, Samaria, and it's some men. You don't get a name, you don't get descriptions, you don't get to hear their processes or systems. Some men went there and the power of God moved.
Absolutely. And so it started there. And so I started asking the question, like, how did we get to the point where now it requires PhDs and it requires all this? A friend of mine, we were having this conversation, he got saved over in the former Soviet Union back when it was still, communist deal. And all they knew is we're going to give our lives to Jesus. We're going to be baptized, which had to happen at night in secret, in a river, kind of the whole deal. And they got done, and he says, I opened my Bible, and it said, lay hands on the sick, and they were recovered. So we laid hands on the sick, and they recovered. We did this, and this happened. And he says, and I went along, somebody said, you really need to go to Bible college. And so he went to Bible college. He says, and I came out, and I had this degree, and I had all of these things, but now there was no power, right? He said, and pray and nothing happens. And I did, and so it goes back to that thing going like, wow, when did things get so complex? And so in this time, really just wrestling with God over this thing. And he said this to me just in one of those moments. He said, listen, I need you to do 3 things and 3 things only.
Here we go.
You do these 3 things and you will hear, well done, good and faithful servant.
Yeah.
Preach the gospel, make disciples, shine your light. And it's like, this is almost too easy, right?
Simple.
Yeah. And that really just brought back this resolve of what does that look like? And we're at a key point as a church. We're launching, right? And so we are not beholden to any of the structures that we say, well, that has to be there.
Sure.
The question is that going to help us to preach the gospel? Are we going to be able to make disciples? Yeah. Right? And are we going to corporately be able to let our light shine in the community? We're going to figure out how to do that and do it well.
Yeah, and I think that's something that if we were honest, that we long for. because, again, not to go back to the hurry thing, but and if you've never read the book Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, it's not a plug for it, but it is a great book. He talks about a lot of that, the overcomplication of things, and I think that's something we probably long for. I know it resonates with me.
Oh, yeah.
I was just sharing with you the other day about this leadership resource that I was walking through, that talking about student ministry, and it's like, what if we gauged the success not on the number of hands raised or number of those that went through a class or whatever, but like the quality of disciple we developed 3 years from now. And it's like, that's challenging to me, but what it does is it requires a more simplistic model, getting back to the root of things, I think.
It does, and honestly, that's what people that are outside of church culture really want. I had the opportunity, because we weren't meeting on Sundays, and week one I was down in the Orlando area, and so on a Sunday I went down to Disney Springs and I just watched people on a Sunday and looked around, and sometimes in church we create these narratives that says like everyone that's not in church, their lives are falling apart and they're miserable and they're and I looked at them and I'm like, no, they seem to be doing pretty good, and we're nowhere in terms of church culture. We're nowhere on their radar, right? This is waking up on a Sunday, and we make the decision: are we going to go to church? Are we not going to go to church? That's not a struggle that they have. Yeah. And I'm watching all of this, and I'm asking the question: what are they really looking for? And I really came down to this thing: what they're looking for is a God who's real. Any God, as long as he's real. And how do I access, if he's real, how do I gain access to this God that's real? And we've turned this thing into like all these different formulas and all these different things, and it's like, wow, Holy Spirit, help us to really simplify what that looks like.
Well, it's like remembering that, like, we do serve the one true living God.
Absolutely.
He absolutely is real.
Yeah.
And like, we believe he's still moving. And it's like, how do we just introduce people to that? How do we inspire people to follow that God, that Jesus?
Yeah. And so with that, really, I said those three things: preach the gospel, make disciples, and discipleship isn't a class, by the way, right? It's that one-on-one. It's that day-to-day, day in. Not just people learning what you know, but seeing the example of your life in the day-to-day. So what does it look like, if I'm discipling you and we call up one day and you go, hey, you got time? And I'm like, no, I've got to run some errands, but why don't you come run errands with me? Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. And now you get to see what is
versus saying like, hey, man, we got a class on Sunday at 10:30. Like, think of the difference of that. Like,
right.
No, just
come with me. And now you get to see what I look like when the waiter gets my order wrong. Yeah. Right? Yeah. What does discipleship look like then? Sure. When they forget to put the special sauce on your burger. Yeah. What does it look like, when you're stuck in traffic? What does discipleship look like then? Yeah. And
I had a student last week at our student service, and he shared in small groups that he was like starting to dig into, gain more interest in like apologetics. And I was like, oh man, we should I didn't want to interrupt the small group session, the discussion train of thought, but I was like, we should talk more about that. Like, I want to talk more about that. So I went to his baseball game last night, him and another student playing the same team, and he caught me. He came out of the dugout in the middle of his game. It's a league game. It's not like AAU or anything, but comes out of the dugout, and I'm getting ready to leave because I had to go home and help the babies go to bed, and he's like, hey, I don't know if you were serious, but we should definitely get lunch. And I'm like, I'm 100% serious. I'm 1,000,000% serious. So we're going to get lunch next week, and he just wants to talk more about apologetics. And so for me, I think that's probably, like, that's a personal experience with probably more of what you're talking about, and it's like this availability.
Yeah, being available.
Relationally,
Yeah, and it's, I mean, that's the key. It is relationship. Yeah. It's relationship with God, but it's also relationships with one another. And what you're really inviting people, because that's what people want to be invited into. They don't want to be invited into your meeting. They don't want to be invited into your church. What they want to be invited into is a relationship. Yeah. And it's really, that's not that hard.
It's not, if we're willing. Yeah. Which, speaking of relationships, we have something exciting coming up for us as a church. I know that we've been in a digital space for a while, but in like 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks from now, May 18th, that's a Sunday, we're gathering in person here.
Real people in a real room. It's gonna be
Real
awesome.
people.
Yeah.
You're going to get an opportunity to share a little bit about that, and then share maybe a little bit about what you've got lined up for June that you want to share with people.
Yeah, well, I think it was in Hebrews, where the writer of Hebrews said, we must pay more careful attention to the things that we've already learned, lest at any time we let them slip.
Yeah.
And there's this interesting thing about truth. When a truth is first revealed, when we first get whatever that truth or that concept is, there's a power to it. There's a transformativeness. It has the ability to transform and to do all of those things. But then what happens over time is we then begin to build in these systems to kind of help bring order to these truths and these things that are happening that are bringing about transformation. And we need systems, right? We have to have them.
Sure.
Because if we don't, things fall into chaos. But it's kind of a double-edged sword, because with systems comes the challenge of systems is that over time it morphs.
Yeah.
And rather than
it's cloudy.
Well, rather than just trying to uphold that truth that we've got, systems begin to take on a life of their own, and then the deal becomes about protecting the system.
Mission drift.
Yeah, mission drift. Yes.
I read about it earlier. It's a tool to accomplish the mission, which is preach the gospel, shine your light, make disciples, and then it becomes the mission somehow.
Yeah, and then it gets so complicated that we have to figure out ways to dumb it down.
Yeah.
So we start creating logos, and this, or not logos. We've been talking about logos like all
branding,
week, so
exciting stuff,
but slogans, right?
Yeah.
To try to dumb it down. I mean, read any book on preaching, and they start talking about, well, it's got to be memorable, it's got to be this, and so we
3 points, alliteration,
right? And so we dumb it down so that it's portable and that it's easy. But the challenge is that it's now portable, but it's already lost the original power of that moment.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I realized that we need to do as a church, particularly because we're a non-denominational church, is we need to get back and go, okay, what are these truths?
Sure.
And what does Scripture really say about them? Not just what do we assume that they mean because we inherited their meaning.
Yeah.
All right. I've said this before. You talk to, you and I, we kind of have a Pentecostal background.
Yeah.
Some of us here got Baptist backgrounds,
Glory.
and some are Catholic backgrounds, and so even you use a term like discipleship.
Yeah.
Depending on where you're from, that means something completely different.
And because there's been 100 systems put out, there's 100 different versions of it.
So let's go back and not figure out what do we mean by that, right? Because we're just another system. What did Jesus mean?
Yeah.
When the apostles heard that and when they did that, what did they mean? And let's get back to those original deals. And so we're going to gather and just kind of bring us up to speed, but then we're going to start doing what we're going to call Sunday boot camp.
Yeah.
And that's
Bridge
where we're
City
going to
boot camp.
Bridge City boot camp, and
so that's beginning in June. It's going to be 4 weeks, right? At least right now, 4 weeks in June, in person, on Sundays here at the Bridge City location, and but May 18th, 10:30 a.m.
10:30
here on a Sunday. We're going to worship. We're going to worship together. Pastor Sean's going to share some more of his heart and his vision and more about what's going to happen in that June boot camp and how you can be involved with that. And that's really exciting. During this time period, we want to continue to invite you. If you are not in a community group yet, you can still do that. You can go online to bridgecitycc.org. There's a page there. You can give, you can join a group, you can sign up for our newsletter as well so you don't miss any of these updates that's coming out right now about things like May 18th, about the Bridge City Boot Camp that's going to happen in June. We want to make sure that you get all of that information. And so bridgecitycc.org, right now it's live. You can sign up and find a group, see the whole library there, and also get all the information about our newsletter. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook at Bridge City Community Church, so you can engage with all the content there and stay connected. We're glad to have Pastor Sean back.
I'm glad to be back.
The Return of the Jedi. I'm sticking with it. I'm still lobbying that as a title. But we're so glad you joined us today for episode 4 of the Bridge City Community Church podcast. And we'll catch you again really soon. And hopefully we see you in person on May 18th at 10:30 a.m. We'll see you next time.